would a father assault his own daughter? Or what would attract a 40-year-old man to a 6-year-old girl? What goes on in the mind of a rapist? These questions are enough for us to take a break from our discussion on COVID-19 and talk about gender-based violence. And that's what we're doing on this episode of Special Report. You're welcome. I'm Imi John Mekwa. It's a poster that has been making the rounds these days, both in the new and traditional media. It's not a fluke. Stories like that of 23-year-old resident of Lagos who's been arrested for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl in his neighborhood confirms this.
I know that it's a small girl, but as she come meet me, no be say I by force am, but I'll just make sure say make my body dey okay. I don't know wetin na push me that day. I follow the girl sleep. As I follow her sleep, as I now tell the girl that I promise her that okay, if we say for evening, I will give her money, and she as well say no wahala.
The promise of money or gifts to lure children to a dastardly act is not a new trick. With most cases recorded in homes and neighborhood, it is safe to assume that an abuser has in many instances intentionally planned the act.
A particular person is grooming your child. Predators groom children. Most times they don't just pounce on children and defile them. There is a process, a deliberate process that they undertake to groom. So it's a process of getting into a sexual relationship with a child and preserving that relationship in secrecy. That's grooming. So there are things that are done to win the trust of the child and also the trust of the parents or the caregivers. And that's why you have some instances where people report that a particular person has been defiling the child. Even the caregivers don't believe. Why? Because they themselves have been groomed. They've been groomed to think that this person is a saint, he's the pastor, he's the imam. He can't be guilty of what he's alleged to have committed.
When the accusation is alleged to come from quarters that are too close for comfort, it becomes more worrisome.
So my wife now told her that she don't have 1,200 presently.
The 35-year-old father has been arrested by the police after a pharmacist in his locality noticed that his 11-year-old daughter has been sexually abused, and the daughter indicted him.
So when I get to Okoko police station, I met my wife, I met my daughter. I asked my wife, what happened? She cannot explain. She said I should ask the policeman. So she didn't know why she's here. So the DPO now come to me. He said, young man, there is allegation from your daughter against you. Did you sleep with your daughter? I said, Daddy, I can't do that. It's abomination according to our tradition. I can't sleep with my daughter.
One thing about sexual abuses of minors, they are mostly done by people close to them. By people very close to them. Sometimes their parents, their uncles, friends of the family, their teachers, even their siblings. People who have taken time to build relationship with them over time or with their family, and they are free with.
There are even more inexplicable situations of sexual violence, raising questions such as what motivated the assault of a 100-level student of microbiology in the University of Benin, Vera Owaila Omazua in Edo State, who was in a church she attends to study and was raped right there. Or a fully dressed 18-year-old Barakat Bello who was gang raped in Ibadan, Oyo State. Or even an 85-year-old raped by her grandson in Niger State.
A lokacin da muka je gidansu.
My friends and I took some alcohol and I slept off. Shortly after, we heard gunshots and people scampered to safety. I ran into the room of my grandmother. She was sleeping, so I went and held her.
What goes through the minds of individuals like these who carry out such unkind acts are not just children but also adults?
We were interested in actually knowing. We were interested in profiling sex convicts, and we did. in 2016, we actually partnered with the Nigerian Prison Service, as they were referred to then, and we're able to engage 140 sex convicts with the purpose of ascertaining why they perpetrated this crime. And some of our findings were quite remarkable. 80.5% of them said they had been abused before the age of 6, and so they had been exposed to unhealthy sexual relationship. And most of them did not receive psychosocial support, so they had continued to abuse. They had been abused and they started abusing others. A good number said they were under influence of alcohol and pornographic materials. So their mindsets had been awashed with, such sexual arousing images, either in the form of pornography or other form of content. And so that was a factor for them. A good number a good number of these sex convicts also said they were not aware that it was as serious as it was. They thought that maybe it's just like maybe stealing, so maybe like 2 years or 3 years. They did not know that in Lagos, sexual assault by penetration, rape, defilement of children carries life imprisonment. So there was a bit of that low level of awareness, even amongst the perpetrators. But I think these are not excuses, right? We're not excusing bad behavior, but I think when you want to address issues, you need to look at the root cause. Why are people perpetrating these acts? Nobody was born a rapist or an abuser. These are behaviors that were learned.
Psychiatrist Bolutife Oyatokun says there's been a global study of the mind of a rapist, and among other things, the problem points towards mental illness.
As of now, the American Psychiatric Association, everywhere, all mental health physicians everywhere still accept and define pedophilia as a mental illness. In that instance, the person is not really attracted to maybe a mature woman, but most times they are attracted to children that are not yet sexually, they don't have the secondary sexual characteristics yet. So that is what catches their fancy. And it's not acceptable in society. So most times these individuals have been able to couch this desire in being married to an adult woman. So when they have the opportunity to actually act out their fantasies and their desires, then there is some sort of power play also. Yes, I'm the father, but it gives them some sort of thrill that, okay, I can do this and actually get away with it. I can do this in secret. So it's still some sort of power, but based on their unconscious desires and their maybe fantasies. It's been found that most times it's not because this person wants sex. It's like an act just to show that I have power over you. So it's more of an expression of power, and sometimes, yes, there could be anger there could be some form of revenge, but most times it's just to show that I am more powerful than you are, or to an extent I have more power than you do have. Even if I decide to walk on the streets naked, I do not deserve to be raped. It is a fundamental part of me. I have the right to do what I want with my body. Nobody has any right over me. So it's never about indecent dressing. It's never about being drunk. It's never about where you've been or what you're doing. It's about you being you and someone choosing to exert some form of power over you. It's not because for crying out loud, there are prostitutes around that would charge you to have sex with you. So it's not because the person is deprived of sex. It's just because that person's mind is sick and wicked and just decides to do whatever they feel they could do.
The Ministry of Women Affairs records that over 2 million girls and women are raped annually, even though Amnesty International has complained that the federal government does not make public any records it holds of incidents of gender-based violence in general, nor of rape in particular, but instead it tags it as offenses against persons.
This was a survey that was carried out in 2014 by the federal government, and it came out with these statistics. It's 1 in 4 of girls will experience sexual violence, and in boys it's 1 in 10. And that translates to 17 million children in Nigeria that will experience sexual violence before they reach adulthood. And in Lagos alone, when we did the calculations, it comes down to one child being sexually abused every 23 minutes.
The outbreak of COVID-19 and the measures to curb it may have contributed to an increase in the figures, either by way of locking in the survivors with the abusers or creating more time for individuals to follow up on the process of reporting.
Since the lockdown, we've attended to, on average, 13 new cases daily via our hotline and our *6820# USSD application short code. But in the wake of the national outreach against sexual and gender-based violence, we've been getting on average 3 new cases via social media, more on sexual violence, incidents that have just happened, incidents that happened 10, 20 years ago, and people just want perhaps access to psychosocial support, or they are requesting if these cases can even be investigated and looked into. Before the lockdown, via our hotline, 10 cases. People coming into the office, on average, 8 new cases daily.
Say no to rape! Again, say no to rape!
Dealing with sexual violence becomes a matter of national importance because it leaves in many cases scars that are very difficult to heal, not just to the survivors, but in the case of minors, their parents are heavily affected. That's the agony of this father whose 6-year-old daughter was assaulted by an almost 40-year-old Bayo Lekon.
Anytime I think about this, like I got in crazy, like I'm not getting myself sometime. She later opened up that there was one man called Engineer. He's sleeping with me several times. Why can't you shout? He said, no, if I talk to anybody, will kill me. He said he will marry me. He said he will marry you. Person that can born you, say he will marry you. How comes? I think it's about 30-something years. I think get it to 40 by then. So later, we could confirm that this case have to go police station.
Thankfully, Bayo Lekon has been convicted and is serving a 30-year sentence in Lagos State. But his act leaves a scar in the life of the 6-year-old and her family.
When someone has been a victim of sexual violence, it could affect the person either physically, mentally, or like a societal thing. So the physical things that could occur include things like infections to sexually transmitted infections and HIV. There could be pregnancies and unsafe abortions as a result. There could be some other maybe bruises if it was if the sexual violence occurred in the context of maybe an abuse or something. There could be physical injuries also. Those are physical things. Then the psychological aspect, it could be acute, what we call short term, or it could be on the long term. Most times at the initial period, there could be some sort of dissociation where the person just trying to maintain sanity, and so they seem to maybe laugh irrelevant laughs or just smiling sheepishly or smiling at nothing in particular. The person could be withdrawn, or the person could just act out. So it could be an acute thing, or on the long term, people that have experienced sexual violence are prone to having depression, they're prone to having mood disorders, they're even prone to having post-traumatic stress disorder. It's been recorded in the context of sexual violence. They are prone to having anxiety issues. Maybe they are unable to sleep well. They keep having flashbacks of this act that was perpetrated on them.
The victory against Bayo Lekon would not have been recorded if there was no bold step by the parents to break the culture of silence. This has been hinted as a major reason for the increase in cases of gender-based violence, along with issues such as stigmatization.
There's still a huge lack of awareness about the dynamics of child sexual abuse. Most people still assume it's something that happens to a subset of people. It's not people that they know or they're affiliated with. There's a real lack of awareness of about the responsibility of ourselves as adults to protect children and to prevent abuse. So when you also think about the major issue of underreporting, Underreporting is one of the main reasons for the high incidence of abuse. Most children will never tell you or tell anyone about what has happened to them for many reasons: fear, shame, guilt. And this is due to that social and cultural issues, the biases, the stigmatization. All of these things are still attached to reporting abuse and reporting perpetrators, particularly in incestuous cases. So child sexual abuse is still heavily regarded as normal, generally across the country, in the sense that if it happens, people still keep silent. It's only the rare case that you see people talking about. So what we need to do is to change the entire culture totally, so that we need to change it to one that makes it clear that, look, child sexual abuse is a crime. It's a crime to be punished, and the culture that we need is one that makes adults understand their responsibility in protecting adults, in protecting children. And we also need to change to a culture that makes the abusers absolutely accountable for their crime. That is what we need, and we're not there yet. We're far, it's still a long way.
The law enforcement comes into the picture here, protecting survivors and encouraging more individuals to come forward, maybe at their doorstep.
In all the things we give out, we protect the identity of the survivor. We never even give out names of survivor. If there is a photograph that is already out, if we still want to use it, we'll blank the face of the survivor. You will never see it. That is a step also to protect those survivors of rape or sexual abuse generally. Then at the police station also, we took a bold step. The MPF took a very bold step by identifying officers that will be dedicated for this cause alone. Investigating sexual-based violence, sexual abuses, gender-based violence required different styles, different techniques, different approach. It's not the way you investigate armed robbery, kidnapping, or any other crime. Try as much as possible to restore the survivor to the position where she were before the event, which is a bit difficult thing to do. So an ordinary person cannot do that. The culture of blame will end up discouraging or destroying the person the more. And anything that will make the person feel that she is being blamed must be taken away. Part of what we also did to take away this blame culture is not allowing the survivor repeat her story over and over. Like what you do in normal crime. The suspect goes through quite a number of interview sections in the police station. Now, if the survivor is allowed to go through that process also, at a point she will ask herself, why are they asking me to repeat the story over and over? Are they not believing me? So we make it in such a way that the survivor will be interviewed only once by the investigator. And that interview will be done in a private interview room in the police station. That's why we have the unit dedicated with a private interview room where only the investigator and the survivor will sit out of public hearing. But then the courts also, they don't testify in an open court. In Lagos here we have special courts that entertain such cases. And cameras are not allowed into courts, and her testimony is always given in camera. That means in private, so that crowd will not come and listen to her story, especially when it has to do with a minor.
Many agree that there's yet more work to be done to strengthen the country's system for the purpose of getting justice. The legislatures are in agreement with this.
A rape victim goes to police to report, and the policeman or woman tells the victim to go and sort it out at home, as it is a domestic case. And the consequences of such act is that the victim is left at the mercy of the society without protection. This sort of stigma has prevented many survivors from reporting abuse and seeking justice. Victims of insurgency and other violent acts need this kind of laws that will not only promote gender equality, the empowerment of women and girls as fundamental to all efforts to prevent and address sexual violence in conflict, but can also progressively uplift such victims by making sure that assistance was not subjected to undesirable limitations, such as denial of a normal livelihood, employment, or the provision of sexual and reproductive health care to help survivors in a standardized manner. Part of the objectives of this bill is to provide legal solutions and norms to the serious psychological and traumatic experiences such victims suffered, with a view to help the victims understand and deal better with what they are going through and see themselves equal like all of us.
Parents and survivors can help the system to accelerate justice. The message from the government and non-government organizations is gathering evidence. While in some parts of the country, the adoption of sexual offenders register has started, individuals are encouraged to get involved.
When it does happen, a person is a victim or a survivor of sexual violence, first of all, know that it's not a death sentence. And in Lagos, there is help. But there are certain things that we must do if we're supposed to truly end the culture of impunity. We encourage survivors not to take their bath, not to douche, not to brush their teeth, not to wash their hands, because sometimes there's struggle. We encourage them to immediately or as soon as possible go to either the nearest comprehensive family health care center or the Mirabel Center or Warif to receive medical attention. Forensic head-to-toe examination will be done, and so that we can start to take samples that we can transmit to the DNA lab for forensic examination. We need to start solving these cases with science. We need to move beyond, he did it, I did not do it. We need to link perpetrators to their survivors.
Higher number of perpetrators as men, some Nigerians are beginning to question the training given to the boy child and the mindset that some men have grown up with. To speak against this, some men in Lagos took a walk against rape.
I think that's important in this society, especially a misogynistic, patriarchal society, where there's a sense of entitlement that comes with being a male child, where a lot of times narrative we hear is the fact that because we are men, we feel that we are entitled to certain things. What has happened in a society is we have grown up with boys being irresponsible and immature, not to take responsibility for their actions. What it means to be a man is to take responsibility for your actions. All too often we hear about what the women did. It's about what she wore. It's about where she was. It's about what she was doing, what she should not have been doing. No means no. Whether she comes to your house, no means no. Whether she's wearing an indecent outfit, no means no. You have no right, you are not entitled to any woman's body, to any woman's privacy. It's her right, it's her body. No means no.
Sexual violence is never about indecent dressing. In fact, experts in the medical field tell us it's more about mental health, and it's no blame at all goes to the survivor. That's one of the messages we'd like for you to take away from this episode of Special Report. I'm Imi John Mekwa.